So the title of this talk derives from Hilary Putman assertion that says that there are two sorts of tools in the world, tools like hammers or screwdrivers, which can be used by one person only, and tools like steamsheets, which require cooperative activity of a number of persons to use. And words are being thought of too much in the model of the first sort of tool. I think we can easily apply this assertion to ontology because ontologies are vocabularies and words run in the veins of ontologies. However, we have the same problem that Putman shows, because literature reports that bibliographic ontology elements are being used most of the times not as steamsheets or collective tools, but as screwdrivers used by single entities in isolation. This presentation is about the alignment of bibliographic ontologies so that they can be used as cooperative tools. The aim of this talk is to explain the potential of a solution that is part of a PhD research, a solution that we call the Reference Ontology, the potential of this solution to overcome some of the bibliographic ontologies limitations and interoperability issues. The main problems reported in the literature and that can be analyzed in practice can be grouped into three categories of limitations. The lack of a common conceptual framework is the first group. For a diversity of standards that are often together, there is a lack of common conceptual frameworks and common methodologies for creating or mapping linked data in these ontologies. And this is well known in the very well shown in the well-known OSMA picture of the forest of bibliographic ontologies. The second type of issues that arise are related to the underuse of semantic web abstraction mechanisms by bibliographic ontologies. And this not use of semantic abstractions leads to the lack of inference and reasoning in these ontologies when used together. In this group of limitations, we also have problems of misuse of external ontologies and problems caused by point-to-point mappings. Point-to-point mappings, like the one that you can see in the slide, or crosswalks, do not solve the issues of the semantic compatibility. In fact, this type of mapping works well in one-to-one relationships, but does not assure interoperability in multilateral correspondence relations like one-to-many or many-to-one, or when there is a lack of correspondence. Beside these issues, crosswalks also have scalability problems. In fact, in this kind of pairwise ontology methods, these imply direct alignments between every two ontologies. So any new ontology that you join to the map must be mapped directly to each and every other ontologies in the map. And this is not scalable when you join or have to align a growing number of ontologies. The third group of limitations corresponds to limitations of IUL and RDF and semantic web languages in general. Because of the open world assumption that the former speaker talked about, our constraints only allows us to infer new or implicit information, but they don't really validate or ensure the integrity of the data. For that, you need another language, SHACL, that the previous presenter explained. And so not using SHACL to close parts of the open world can lead to bibliographic ontologies, inconsistencies, or even errors. So our solution to overcome these limitations imply the use of abstraction mechanisms of semantic linking between different ontologies and consider alternatives to the transformative methods like the application profiles or crosswalks, that these methods only operate between ontologies at the same level, and our solution suggests the creation of a mediation ontology on one on a level above the source ontologies. This reference ontology represents a higher level of abstraction, and the semantic connections between ontologies permitting the reconciliation of differences and misalignments of these source ontologies. Besides, our solution proposed SHACL constraints to impose and validate data restrictions on these ontologies. So, the following slides will bring to life this reference ontology. This is part, as I have said, of a larger work of PhD research that compared three bibliographic ontologies, LREM, RDA, and BibFrame, in almost 20 description cases. We don't have time to do that, of course. And so we will stick with two selected problems and we'll apply the reference ontology to two real-world examples of datasets of the real world, the dataset of the Library of Congress and the dataset of the National Library of Spain. And so the two ontologies that will be aligned will be BibFrame, that is implemented by the Library of Congress, and RDA, that is implemented by the National Library of Spain, not directly, but because the BNE ontology links to the, is mapped to RDA. We will use a very simple example. So we will use individuals of these two data sets that exemplify this bibliographic example. We will use for the demonstration the Lusíads. The Lusíads are a Portuguese epic poem written by Luís de Camões. And for the two description cases, we will use, for the first one, which is related to the polysemy of the BibFrame class work, we will use these examples. You can see in the top of the slide the circle with number 1. It is the Lusíads. This is the instance of a work and corresponds to the poem, to the intellectual content of this work. Then it has two expressions, the Lusíads written in Portuguese and the Lusíads written in Spanish, embodied into manifestations and so on. On the second description case we will consider the complete works of Luís de Camões that aggregate these Lusíads. So let's, sorry. Yeah. Let's begin with the first problem. The problem is that there's a different granularity between BibFrame and RDA LRM ontologies. As you can see here, LRM and RDA have four entities: work, expression, manifestation, and item, while BibFrame defines only three main bibliographic entities: work, instance, and item. So literature defends that BF work represents both the content, that is the work, and the signs, that is the expression. And so we have a problem of polysemy because BF work corresponds to two concepts and not only one. The same understanding results from the mapping between LRM, RDA, and BibFrame carried out by the Library of Congress that establishes a correspondence point to point between the concepts of work and expression and the concept of work in the BibFrame. The polysemy originates three further problems. The first one is conceptual confusion between the two concepts. The second one is the absence of apparent work common to multiple expression. This is, I call it the Zapodido problem because it was identified by Sophia. And also a third problem because of the absence of a domain restriction for the property BF language. But we will not address this last one, only the two first ones. So to begin with the concept of confusion, BF work instances can correspond to work and or expressions. And this can lead to the concept of confusion of these two concepts. And so the solution we constructed in the reference ontology has two steps. First, when you have a polysemic class, what you have to do, according to Poveder, is to assign a distinct class to each concept. So we created a class, obra, in the reference ontology that corresponds to the concept of work. And we created another class in the reference ontology called expressão that corresponds to the concept of expression. And then we made the correspondence between BF work and our obra, our work in the reference ontology, and between the BF work subclasses like BF text, BF audio, etc. They correspond to our class of expression in the reference ontology. Why? Because these subclasses of BF work, BF text, for example, represent the realization of a work through different signs, like words, sounds, images. So they are conceptually, in our view, expressions. The correspondence between the subclasses of BibFrame and the superclasses of the reference ontology were made using class hierarchy. Why? Because the superclasses in the reference ontology represent the common aspects of the subclasses. And this way, the common characteristics of the subclasses of the source ontologies. And this provided an ascending mechanism because the individual of a given subclass is inferred as an individual of the reference ontology superclass, but they are not inferred as individuals of the subclasses of the remaining source ontologies. And so this preserves the more specific meaning of the subclasses of each base ontology. They are not at the same level, and these mechanisms makes the instance like go up, but not go to the side. It is for this reason that we did not use the equivalence mechanism, because if we use the equivalence between the source ontologies and the super ontology, the instances will be equivalent to the reference ontology class and to all the other sisters source ontologies that could lead to errors or to hijack the source ontologies. In the next slide, in this slide, I will show an example of this solution using the individuals of the data sets. You can see in orange the individuals and the classes of the Spanish data set, and in blue the individuals in this bottom of the Library of Congress data sets, and in the hub the classes of BibFrame and the classes of the National Library of Spain ontology that is mapped by themselves to RDA. So you can see that here in the bottom we have here the Lusiads as a work. And here we have the Lusiads, the expression of this work written in Portuguese. In the Library of Congress dataset, they don't have both classes. They only have one, as we have said, so they represent both the word and the expression in the same individual. It has a double type. It is a BF text, and it is also a BF work. So we made this. This is the mechanism of the class hierarchy that relates RDA subclass work with our work in the reference ontology, and the same happens in the Library of Congress BF work, and then we mapped the BF text subclass to the reference ontology expression class, and the same with RDA. And what happens is that due to the class hierarchy, this is not going. Stop. Okay. And so you can see that these mechanisms has made inference work. So the Lusiad Spanish work is an instance of, an inferred instance of our work class in the reference ontology, because it is an instance of the National Library of Spain ontology class of work, which is also a subclass of RDA work. And so this simple subclass link made possible to infer the individuals as of the subclasses as individuals of the superclass in the reference ontology. And as you can see, it works only in an ascending direction. That is, you cannot say that the National Library of Spain individual is it is an individual of work in the reference ontology, but it is not an individual of BF work. So it only functions in this direction. So when you vary to know what are the expressions in the data sets, in both the data sets, it will return both the expressions of the data set of the National Library of Spain and the expressions of the Library of Congress. And so the lower granularity of BibFrame regarding the representation of expressions is resolved because both the Library of Congress and the National Library of Spain individuals are clearly identified as expressions by the class hierarchy system. Another problem is the second problem is the polysemy is that the polysemy of the BibFrame work class generates the absence of a common parent work to different expressions. In BibFrame, as you can see here, for each realization of a work, for these two expressions of this work, in the given language, you have a different instance for each one. But in BibFrame, for each realization of a work in a given language, you also have a different instance of BibFrame work. So here you have two expressions, the Portuguese text of Lusíadas and the Spanish text of Lusíadas. They can be connected to a single parent work. But in the BibFrame, this is not done this way. So what they do is that they assign, since each instance is simultaneously expression and work, they have for each expression one work. And this way, we lose the perception that both the text in Portuguese and the text in Spanish are realizations of the same idea, of the same poem. And this query shows that when you ask for BF works, it will show the two instances. So how can we solve this? To solve this problem, the Library of Congress proposes that each linking relationships between work and expression should be mapped to an instance of BF work. This is a solution of the Library of Congress. And that the different work instances should be related to each other by BF as expression. Well, this solution do not solve the problem because you still don't have a single common parent work, and it is also not correct because the Lusíadas in Spain, in Spanish, for example, is not an expression of the Lusíadas in Portuguese, for example. In contrast, in the reference ontology, since we can clearly state which instances are expressions and which instances are works, you can relate without violating BibFrame. It would be enough to relate the expressions of the Library of Congress to the existing work of the dataset of National Library of Spain, or create a work for that in the reference ontology. But if you have this work defined in the National Library of Spain dataset, you can link to it, and in this way you will have a common work for the two instances in the BibFrame. Now I will explain the second description case. It is related with whole part properties omission. The problem is that BibFrame and RDA do not represent whole part relationships with the properties they should have. In the bibliographic domain, this don't happen in all domains, but in the bibliographic domain, this type of relationships should be transitive, because each subpart, this is, for example, the relations between this instance of complete works of Mr. Camões and these three parts, for example, volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3, and a subpart, chapter 1, for example. So in the bibliographic domain, this kind of relations should be transitive, because each subpart must be able to be inferred as part of the whole. Chapter 1 is part of volume 1, and you should be able to infer that it is also part of the all of the complete works. And properties like non-reflexivity, a part cannot be part of itself, or asymmetry, the whole and part cannot switch places, okay? Lack of transitivity, for example, you have these relationships are in the BibFrame are expressed using the property as part, and as part is not transitive. So when you question which are the parts of the complete works using the property of BibFrame, it will only respond the direct relation. It will not infer that chapter 1 is also part of the complete works. How did we solve that? We created a transitive property, part D, and it was created in the reference ontology as transitive, and we created a hierarchy of properties between this reference ontology property, part D, and the properties that represent the parts in the source ontologies. Because whenever you apply a more specific property, that is the properties of the source ontologies, since they are subproperties of the other one that is transitive, they will always be, you can infer the application of the super property, and as it is transitive, it will assure transitivity of the relationships. So in this example, you have the declaration we have seen from BibFrame, and then because of these two mechanisms acting together, it is possible to infer, inferences are in the dashed lines, that chapter 1 is also part of the complete works. So if you question again what are the parts of the complete works, but using the part, the property, you will get the two parts. And finally, we don't have time to address the two other properties. We'll just address one. One of the properties is that the part property is not reflexible, so a part cannot be a part of itself, of course. And the other thing is asymmetry. The whole and the part cannot switch positions. Well, OWL cannot guarantee the application of these two restrictions, not only because of the open world assumption and because of the problem that OWL is only uses constrictions to infer and not to validate data, but also because transitive properties in OWL cannot be non-complexive or adimetric. So for these two reasons, we had to use SHACL, and we made this node shape using a dash vocabulary restriction of no recursion. You can see here. It was set to true. What that means that when you use the super property of the reference ontology part D, the subject of that super property cannot be its own object, cannot point to itself. And to validate this SHACL restriction, we created this error. Volume 1 is pointing to itself as part of the volume 1 is part of volume 1. This is an error. And when you run the validator, it is successful pointing the error we made. So conclusions is that we can overcome bibliographic ontologies, isolation, or absence of interlinks through the application of semantic web abstraction mechanisms, through a reference ontology that interlink them to each other. This interlinking is alternative to the common methods of profiles or crosswalks, since it uses mediation techniques more suitable and scalable in the semantic web. They allow the inference, as you can see here, in the crosswalk. For each new ontology, you have to map to all the others. And using a mediation ontology, you just have to map to the integration ontology, and all the other mappings to the source, to the other source ontology will be inferred. On the other end, we used SHACL constraints to close parts of the bibliographic world without violating the open world assumption. And so we managed to get inference of implicit information through indirect mapping without replacing or modifying the source ontologies. And we managed also, recurring to SHACL, to overcome semantic omissions of bibliographic ontologies and overcome even limitation of semantic web languages, achieving important possibilities of constraining and assuring the correct data structures. Okay. Okay. More information can be found here. And thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have one quick question to keep in time. Do you know the OpenWemi ontology from Dublin Core? or the share VDE talk also introduced another upper concept above the work. Are they both relevant to this too?
Yes, the research is closed. I am awaiting the examination and did not consider the versions of Bitframe and RDA that are in use now. They refer to previous versions and were limited to those ontologies. So they are not considering Open WEMI or other ontologies. They were they focused only in these three and in the versions that were valid in 2023.
Okay, so there are some more questions, but I please answer in the chat, or there's still a chance to ask more questions, and maybe we can also answer after the third talk.